Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Narrative, The Road to 100. This has been an amazing journey, and this is another one of those ones that you need to tune in and really listen to, hear, interpret, take in, consume. We have Tiffani Martin, who is just dynamic in the tech space, doing amazing work with her company Visiotech, as well as I believe the first time I heard you speak, Tiff, it was actually related to policy and some work you were doing. So I want to get into that. Before we jump into the questions, I want to open up some space just for you to give a quick introduction to the folks and tell us who you are and a little bit about what you do.
As mentioned, Tiffani Martin. I am located here in Dallas, Fort Worth, Funky Town, Triple D, all of the above. And like mentioned before, founder and CEO of Visiotech, which is actually a subsidiary of our parent company, JancynCo. Both leverage AI in different aspects. JancynCo with business development and Visiotech on all tech-related projects. We work on the research, development, and training of accessible technologies, leveraging AI to do so, with our core services being in web and digital audits and remediation. Secondly, education and training. And lastly, but quite exciting for me is sustainable product development. And we have a team here in Dallas, and we also have a team in Chicago. So that's just, us in a nutshell, but we're just really leaning into accessibility and AI. And we launched earlier the Accessible AI Quotient Framework, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but that is our sweet spot, accessibility and AI.
And I think that this is extremely just imperative for us to get into
Mhm.
related to that. Myself, I've worked in the ed tech space, and accessibility is definitely a thing when it comes to student learning, especially with, the pandemic hit, everybody online.
Mhm.
But I think what I've heard from you in the work that you're doing is definitely leaning into more in supporting some of the adults in the space as well, where I personally have not necessarily seen a whole lot of that support. I'll be
Mhm.
completely honest. And whenever I heard you speak and actually visited your site and checked out what you were doing, I was like, all right, yeah, this is extremely important, and enough people aren't talking about it. I'll be frank.
Mhm.
So, with that in mind, considering the work that you're doing within accessibility, within the AI and tech space at
Mhm.
large, I want to ask you our driving question, which is what does narrative mean to you?
Off top, just, you know, an organic thought about it is just ownership, right? For somebody with my intersectionality, when I walk into a room, there are preconceived notions and narratives that are already placed, being a woman, being a Black woman, and being a Black woman with a disability, right? So it is up to me when I walk in with authority to be able to control and own my own narrative. So a lot of that for me is demystifying stereotypes and stigmas and those preconceived notions I mentioned earlier. That comes with a lot of barrier breaking, right? Just this, conversation, awareness, things of that nature, just to eradicate what we've just kind of naturally done as a society. And for me personally, I haven't seen reflections of myself in the spaces that I primarily involved in, right? So the corporate sectors, or even in academia, local, like areas in government, whether that's local, state, or federal. So it really, all of that to say, it really is about ownership.
And I think that that's a really interesting perspective. That's definitely the first time I've heard the word ownership be used in context of that question. And it means a whole lot for me. And even hearing about the representation aspect, because commonly we hear that, and it's more so related to how you present in terms of your gender or racially or those types of things. But we're going a little bit more in depth, I think, in a sphere that, again, is not necessarily as spoken about in common spaces. So
Mhm.
what I want to do though is dig a little bit deeper into your journey and your background,
Mhm.
and hear more about who is Tiffani as far as your story. And I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit of, like, about your journey and how you ventured into tech and AI, and what led you to where you are today?
That's loaded, man. Like, it's so I will start off, I was not always, blind. I did always have a chronic illness, but I never considered it a disability until, it progressed and then began to impede on just a quality of life. So, just going back, I was diagnosed with type 1 juvenile diabetes at the age of 5. I have an incredibly supportive family, parents who have supported me in every possible thing I could do. We have a really big family. Younger sister is supportive. You got your aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody. I just, being an adolescent kid, just did not take care of myself when it pertained to diabetes, even though I was an athlete. I just didn't take insulin, like do what I was supposed to do. And all of that caught up with me late in my late 20s. So around 27, I was traveling like crazy all over. I was doing global humanitarian work. I had just broadened, my capabilities over, and so I was trying to get into the West Coast market. I had planned on, commuting back and forth between LA and Dallas. And one morning I wake up, whole left side is completely bloodshot red. Can't see out of it. My dad ends up taking me to the emergency room, and they let me know this is the early stages of diabetic retinopathy. And so that really was the start of a 6-month progression of my health declining. And so if you can imagine being 27, flying jet setting everywhere, making deals, having fun, just living your best life, and then one day it just completely changed, and it went from relatively healthy. I say relatively healthy because I felt healthy, but internally things were just freaking havoc. To in 6 months losing about 60 pounds, losing my sight completely after 8 eye surgeries, ending up on peritoneal dialysis after 3 surgeries, and losing the ability to walk. It was completely debilitating, to say the least. And I'm faced with the loss of independence, trying to figure out how to navigate life and process, which within the Black and Brown community, our idea of processing is a push through. So I'm having to develop some healthy coping skills, which did not come until later on. Manage the dynamic of friends or the loss of friends, family dynamics, moving back in with my parents. And at this time, my parents are taking care of not only a dying child with me and doing dialysis at home, but also, a dying parent who suffered from dementia. So I really wanted to like express that part because it really was the driving force of getting to where I was. And so just by a mere encounter, my father ran into this woman by the name of Antoinette Tuff. I encourage everyone to go Google search this woman. You will be amazed by her story. She actually prevented a massive school shooting just by talking and communicating with the assailant. And from there, she also had a child that was blind and had compound disabilities, but shared resources with my dad. And my dad came home, and between him and my mother, just reinforced that, I was strong. I was going to get through it. I was going to maintain my independence. And just that access point to technology and learning just opened up so much more for me. And every course that I took in like my vocational resources, I excelled in learning how to run a PC using JAWS. They said it takes people about a month. I did it in 2 weeks. Learning how to use a MacBook, how to, use a phone, incorporating different devices into the house to make the home a smart home, just learning everything that I could so I can maintain my job. I really didn't want to get on government assistance. And then once I got to a level of comfortability, I realized I can't be the only one that knows about these resources. So I had made it my point to do as much awareness and training as I could, but I'm still dealing with life. During this entire time, I am dating who is now my husband, and we have been friends for a long time. And I friend zoned him, but he came back in my life right when I got sick, and we just developed just this really strong connection, and dated throughout the entire time of me getting my health back, getting a kidney transplant. And right when we got married, I want to say 2 months later, we thought we were pregnant. Come to find out, I was experiencing a kidney rejection and ended up in the hospital, and I was spending like months on end. And it dawned on me that at one stint in the hospital, it was about a month I was in there. It dawned on me that I might not get the chance to have a child and leave a legacy in that way, but I got to leave something behind, leave the world a little bit better. And so I called one of my technologist friends. Her name is Taylor Shedd, and she's the creator of the game Stimuli. And she came up to the hospital, and I said, I want to create a company called Visiotech. So she sat there with her laptop, and for hours, we developed this company. And my first client was with a web design agency, and just teaching them accessibility. And that's literally how I got into accessibility. And last year, early last year, I was talking to my business partner, and I said, we need to go ahead and transition into AI so we can duplicate our efforts, but really learn it so that we can teach it. Everything is about just passing on the knowledge. And so it expedited our processes and productivity, and it just grew out of nowhere from there. So um, that's really like the journey from experiencing a disability to being in a place to where I can help others in similar situations. That all of those things did come with like technical training, becoming a certified scrum master, becoming a certified product owner, because I wanted to learn processes and be able to manage people effectively, and then um, understand the life cycle of projects and how to get them done effectively, just based off of human centered design. And right now, I'm getting my MBA in cybersecurity because with the framework that we developed, it really goes back to ethical and responsible AI. And I'm an avid believer in governance and risk management and compliance. And that's why I really, incorporated and found partnerships within cybersecurity as we are developing all of these AI products and so forth. So that's pretty much everything. I can go on and on about it, but yeah, that's really the gist of my journey and my motivating factor, my why. So yeah.
And well, first, thank you for sharing your story, every aspect of it. Because also, along with that, I know I'll say congratulations when you get it, but shout outs to you, congrats on the NBA. That's definitely a major, you know, point to highlight and lift up as far as even the focal point that you, I think, tapped into, which is that lifelong learning aspect of it,
Mhm.
regardless of what's going on. But I'd be remiss if I didn't also emphasize and highlight one key word that I was thinking as you were telling the initial components of your story and your journey and what you went through, which was resilient.
Mhm.
And I think that there's a lot that many people, including myself, can just really glean from that. And thinking about even beyond that, considering how in a lot of situations when we talk about things like, our village, and a lot of contexts where, we're talking about that in correlation or relation to young people or children, and being a father of a 4-year old, I'm like, yeah, the people who are around. But you just said how you reached out to a good friend, Taylor Shedd, and said, hey, I'm trying to set this thing up, I want to build this. And how you had that networking community to get to a point, and also realize that you wanted to establish something and build something, create something that would have lasting impact, and
Mhm.
also it would take other people, and other hands to be involved in that to make it successful. And I think that that's a typical thing, for many people, that I think to realize in general, regardless of the situation, right? Like you can't build anything on your own if you want it to be
Right.
massive in terms of impact. So I think that all of those things are extremely important and valuable, but definitely keying in on the fact that you continue to have the urge to learn. And I really appreciate how you didn't sugarcoat and say like, look, I didn't go through the upskilling process and the formalities of getting, credentials. Like you did the work. That's the thing too, where it's kind of like the whole catapult effect of I was over here and then I ended up over here. And it's like, no, you gave us the journey and the process, uh,
Yeah.
regardless. So I think that everybody should take something from that in terms of like where you are, where you want to be, and mapping out and framing those steps. So I definitely appreciate every aspect of that story. And you talked about your motivation, uh, in terms of where you ended up and what you're doing now. I'm curious if even within that, after launching Visiotech and branching out, were there certain points in time in that journey where you could begin to realize and actualize that I'm going to have a really big impact in this space by doing what I'm doing?
If you want my honest, transparent feeling, I have never experienced that yet.
Wow.
It's even though we're coming out of the startup phase, even after this year with all of the recognitions and awards, I was telling my husband, and this is no flex at all. I just received the governor's award out here, the Lex Frieden Entrepreneurship Award, which is really big in the disability community. And I got off stage and he said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Until that unemployment rate for people with disabilities goes down, until more students with disabilities are able to get higher education and get MBAs and get PhDs and become researchers and professors, until there's the discrimination against the 1 in 4 Americans with disabilities, until that goes down, it'll never feel like I've achieved anything." Now, granted, that is lofty. That's me trying to go against a system that, predates myself. But until we make an impact that's felt, or at least started, how I see Visiotech is, will I see all of the goals and aspirations I have coming to fruition as far as, society and the marginalized communities that I'm trying to impact? Probably not in my lifetime. But if I can at least spark it and know that somebody's going to carry it beyond me, or come up with maybe this grand tool or device or methodology that people could take and live on beyond me, then I've accomplished something. But I don't know if I've ever felt that, if I would ever feel that. It's just a drive. This is what I've experienced. This is what I know other people are experiencing. Until no, we see something, then that'll just be an insatiable feeling that probably won't get quenched. So it keeps me up at night, wakes me up in the morning, and I feel like we're doing the work. I feel like we're making some progress, but it's so much ahead that we have to reach collectively. But I want to do my part.
And I definitely identify and align with that whole aspect of dot 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 the ellipses, like
Mhm.
the marathon continues type of thing. And I even thought about one of Tupac's quotes when you were speaking about the spark aspect. He said, "I might not change the world, but I will spark the brain that will change the world."
Mhm.
And that's what I'm gathering from you is the things that you're laying out right now, the company that you've produced, all of the initiatives, the awards. I think that the value in those things will be seen by, in my experience, usually younger people.
Mhm.
And from there, they'll be able to say, you know what, look at this. Wow, this is, amazing. And then kind of just pick it up that's the beautiful thing about that, is we have no idea how the work that we're doing right now will ultimately create that lasting impact. But I think that there's great beauty, and there's an artistry to the fact that you do it anyway. And I just think that that's within itself is the nature of it, but that says a lot about what it means to you, which is definitely, something that I think is completely necessary and should be uplifted. And so going, I think, a little bit into talking about the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you're producing, what you're putting out, what you're creating, how you're supporting in the world. Are there any insights right now about any maybe current projects or just things in general that you are most passionate about, and how those things are making a difference in the world?
Yeah, so the two key projects that I'm working on, I'm calling them legacy projects because it is essentially what will be left, like the artifacts of my work, my body of work. Once I'm long gone from now, I just finished a book called I, Robot, bridging the gap between accessibility and AI. It really, funny thing about it stemmed from a conversation, and I expressed this in the book, about my husband and I. He got me on anime, right? And I'm like, what is this? But we were watching this anime called Attack on Titan, and without giving away any, plot points or so forth, it comes a moment where they encounter this technology, and I have no idea why it sparked this interest in my husband. But while we're watching, he turns and he says, "So what really is AI?" And as a in the middle of watching and then trying to switch your brain, it's an assistive technology. Like, in essence, that's what it is. And so it just sparked this dialogue, and I realized from there, like, if I could create something to answer that question, it might eradicate the fears of AI and might empower people. But then I also wanted there to be a level of, I wanted people to be cognitive of accessibility in that. Like, there's this idea called well, it's not an idea, it's actual effect. It's a, phenomena, if you will. It's called the curb cut effect. And the idea is, if you create something for accessibility, it impacts everybody. And it comes from the actual curb cut in which we find on the sidewalk. So everybody uses the little dip at the corner of the sidewalk. It's essentially was created for wheelchairs, but people with strollers use it. People, with dollies, carts. If walking down, sidewalk with, your briefcase, or like, everybody uses this really unknowingly, that, like, it was built for people with disabilities to leverage. So it's that same concept that I want to bring over into everything that we do. So that was the essence of writing the book, is to teach the fundamentals of AI and accessibility, but then show how they intersect, and how, it genuinely can make the entire world better. But here's this group that it impacts, but here's what it can do for other people. So it's that. And then the framework that I mentioned earlier, the accessible AI quotient framework, is, everybody uses the NIST framework for, like, cybersecurity, or in accessibility, the WCAG, or there's guidelines and frameworks that people resort to in technology, just to, as a benchmark, if you will, just something to refer to. And so I wanted to do the same and create something that protects marginalized communities. But if anybody wanted to develop an AI product or system or anything, to be mindful of, like, ethical and responsible AI, inclusive practices. It goes back to the notion, and you would know this, like, for us by us, for people familiar with FUBU. And what's so funny about it, in the disability community, they have a similar motto, but it's nothing about us without us. And so that was the framework. I wanted to empower people to utilize AI, but do so responsibly and effectively. And so it's a huge document. We pushed it out. We actually are working on a chatbot using the actual framework to build a chatbot for the framework. And so I want to be my own case study. And so those are my two legacy projects that I'm working on. And then just touching back on the MBA, to me, I just don't like getting into the master's program in itself was an uphill battle, but I'm using myself as a case study. One, I think standardized testing needs to be completely eradicated. Personal opinion. And I know I'm talking to, a leader in ed tech, but to me, standardized testing does not accurately assess one's competence level. There is a myriad of factors that go into play at the moment that student sits down and takes that exam. We're not, things that we're not even considering. And I think it's a barrier of entry to a lot of progressing up in grades, in education, across the board, even in the workforce. And so I was adamant about finding a R1 research university, a top university that did not require the GRE and GMAT. And Baylor University was that school. And it wasn't a matter of just getting into a top school. It was, I'm going to get into this school without standardized testing. I'm going to maintain a high GPA, and I'm going to do so in a particular field that I know I can turn, and then in turn help my community. But I'm going to do so trying to utilize mobile devices and AI responsibly, not for any type of cheating or whatnot, but in accessibility alone. So when I do graduate, that's the ultimate case study. I'm the ultimate success criteria to tell anybody, hey, there's no reason why you can't allow more students with disabilities into graduate programs. It's been proven. Any notions that you've had have been completely destroyed. And it goes back to, the question that you asked me earlier, that narrative is that there is a narrative about students with disabilities out there. And I'm trying to kill these things, right? These sacred cows that people hold on to. So that all of those things are kind of what I'm trying to leave behind, but I'm passionate about. And not just creating it, but like showing the effectiveness and hoping somebody will take it, take the baton and
To that point about standardized testing, we could I could talk at length, but I want to just tell you in that notion, you're not alone in
Mhm.
that frame of thinking. Yes, so definitely considering, and then just even because I've seen it at the very kind of inception level of when those things are implemented. I mean, I started out teaching third grade.
Mhm.
That whole thing begins, and I've seen some stuff related to what that does just to the psyche and the joy of people, children.
Mhm.
So just even considering and imagining what that looks like at latter levels in terms of higher education. I'm I hear you. I feel you. We're good. We are good. But I'm really talking about those passion projects that you're currently building and pursuing. It's refreshing to hear how you can have really intentional focus and emphasis on kind of this driving goal and overall, I guess, legacy frame of mind, but really thinking about the pieces, the building blocks that are going to
Mhm.
essentially get you to that. And I'm curious, just in that work, you shared some things with us, but is there anything that's been like the most exciting outcome that you've seen from what you've been doing so far, as it relates to your consideration for the future? Like where are you right now? Is there something that was like, man, that was crazy, this was amazing, and that you just want to share with the world? Any instances, experiences, or even just interactions you've had?
Man, I think to date, and this was just research based, we were just looking at different modes of content, not just, in the production, but like the distribution of it. And Ironically, when we were on Black AI Think Tank, Anastasia Jackson mentioned Hey Jen. And so I said, hey, let's see what tools we can utilize for video, since it's, one of the largest um, consumptions of content, the form, and just test out. And really just kind of sitting there, playing around with the features. Even in the development, we, utilizing other tools when we were generating images and running images, our actual headshots, and getting those animated, and the accuracy and one shot prompts, and just the whole progression. When I sat back and thought about the cost of like how much affordable this is in comparison to just 12 months ago, how quickly we were able to generate. There was no big production budget, there was no big production team. It was myself. At first, we had a team of 5, but just sitting down with myself and my EA, and me just telling her how to utilize something and how quickly it was able to get done, and immediately seeing responses from it. Um, you solidifying contracts from it was that whole process to me. Somebody would package it and show like it really does yield itself to the entrepreneurial impact that can be made specifically to Black and Brown communities if we just move the fear and embrace it. Everybody's worried about the jobs, and I'm like, that's not the concern. Like, I get that that is the concern, is just get the skill. Like, if you embrace it, you can be like in the lead of a lot of areas right now. It is the Wild West. I keep falling back on that, but no, truly, just the level, and we haven't even hit like quantum computing yet when it pertains to AI. But just right now, just the possibilities, that's exciting to me. Now I know you might have been looking for like, is there a particular product that we're developing or anything? No, I'm just looking at the possibilities of just what's out right now. And it boggles my mind why people aren't just jumping on it as quickly as I'm seeing some other areas do it. But yeah, it's just its impact of productivity alone.
And no, I mean, in terms of looking for anything in particular, I think what you gave was amazing, because that is something that I think has to continuously be said over and over again, is not only the efficiency of implementing or just even jumping in on these some of these tools and resources,
Mhm.
but you mentioned even right now looking at the price point for a lot of things, which for a lot of this stuff is like you can either get a trial version, or you could use at least some remnants of the paid aspect of it for free. But yeah, to your point, I personally am like to the notion of get it right now before the gate is put in front of it. And
Yeah.
I think that you really talked directly to that point around just again the skills acquisition, building yourself up. And I think this actually leads into maybe where we can talk a little bit about the framework that you've created and
Mhm.
produced, and how you're building and leveraging that, and maybe even how that the some of the tools and resources are supporting and influencing that work. But can you talk a little bit about your framework, and also even just the importance of having frameworks and things in place as it relates to the work that you're doing, and potential future impact and goals?
Yeah. So we really started with the current laws and regulations that are out. When it pertains to disabilities in America, we are really protected and empowered by the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. And before then, there was really nothing that was in place to help, prevent discrimination of people with disabilities. And it's so important because one of the figures I mentioned before, 26% of Americans have a disability. So that's, 1 in 4 Americans. So, just imagine between apparent and non-apparent disabilities that's out there. We know somebody, if not ourselves, with a disability. And if we just continue to age with the natural progression of our bodies, we might run into low vision or deafness or mobility issues and things of that nature. And we really are a reactionary species, if you will. So it's really kind of like what's happening right now, not thinking of the long term impact of things. And so with AI kind of bursting into the scene, even though it's been here for decades, it really, once it got into the hands of the consumer, we see how quickly it just it blew up. And so with AI coming in there, I really wanted to help people appreciate the power that it brings, but also reinforce the responsibility that we must have from an operational standpoint when we are developing tools. Really trying to move past just the development for capitalism and more so the development of empowering people, whether that's providing autonomy for people with disabilities or opportunities in marginalized communities that haven't had them before or access. And so there has to be some level of accountability and responsibility placed upon the developers and the companies that are creating these tools that we are ultimately using and set some guardrails in place. And so my hopes is, one day it becomes the standard, like the two regulations I mentioned before, like WCAG, we're at two. But it really is a standard that backs the ADA in web and digital platforms. And it's what you refer to if you want to be compliant. And so I'm hoping this is that in the realm of AI. But just keeping in mind the human factor, we have to be careful with the data that we put in, even synthesized data, it still comes from a sample. So making sure that data sets aren't biased in any type of way. And we see it, all of the data that's been collected from a history of a society that was really built on discrimination, that's what we're fighting today. And so, it has that component within it, utilizing people from diverse backgrounds. And one thing that you mentioned before, like when we talk about diversity, it kind of relegates itself to either gender or ethnicity. And the funny thing about it, diversity is not a monolithic thing. It can be religious, backgrounds. It could be abilities. It could be age. It's this wide spectrum of who we are collectively as a people, but the ones that are building the products don't represent the whole. Just like we've seen in leadership capacities in government or in our communities and in our leaderships in corporate America and so forth. It's really, we really have to push diversity in its truest form and really lean into, yes, equality, but more so equity. And so that's what I'm hoping is embodied in this framework for those behind the scenes that are developing the technology using AI.
I know thinking about frameworks and how things are laid out, process and procedure, SOP,
Mhm.
when things are clearly documented and put in place and implementation happens and there's research and data to support things, like there's a greater substantiation looking at that particular initiative or project is as we build on and go into the future. So you mentioned the idea around what you want that to look like, and I think that producing things like a framework and having other people be not only a part of it but also to consider the impact that it will have on other individuals is I think an extension of that, which is extremely important because a lot of people are building and creating and producing things as you mentioned, and it might be more so for like the capital gain aspect, whereas the grounding and framing of what you're building and putting out into the world is more of that that great oak tree seed
Yeah.
that grow into that massive tree, which is, to your point, possibly not necessarily going to benefit you as much currently, personally, but looking down the line, 100 years, what does that mean? And you, I want to throw you a curveball question
Yep.
because you you talked about people, humans, being somewhat of a reactionary species. You use the word species, which is what sparked this for me.
Mhm.
And I would actually, I concur with that. I definitely am in agreement that we are more reactionary than proactive.
Mhm.
So I recently heard an interview with Mustafa Suleiman of Microsoft, and he said something interesting. I want to get your thoughts on it. He used the phrase when referencing AI, uh, new digital species. As we look at, because I kind of look at you as like, hey, you're kind of evolutionary in terms of thinking and what's going on in terms of even just thinking about AI as an assistive technology. Because I don't think that most people would get to that and make that connection. So what are your thoughts on the idea and aspect of AI being a new digital species, as that was put?
Without knowing the context of, like, what exactly he meant, are we talking about agentic and digital
Yes.
twins and things?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't want to seem let me go back. I'll start with the assistive technology. If we just look at it in its minimal use case, if you have an idea and you want to expound on that idea, you go to your phone, you typed in a prompt about this idea, and it assists you, like, and I
Literally.
think people fail to realize, it's only powered by what we put into it. So that's what you have to look at it for. In NLP, if I have a speech impediment and something can translate what I am trying to say and communicate that to somebody else, it has assisted me in that manner. If for myself, using various platforms, I take a picture and using computer visualization, it tells me what that thing is, either through, a wearable device or my mobile phone. It is assisting me, navigate through that day. So that, I really want people to really grasp a hold of that idea, especially when we talk about education. But that is a whole different area with AI and accessibility in education and so forth. But I was personally excited, even though I have a lot of uh, friends in various sectors that are like mortified at the idea of agents and digital twins. And I believe like Zoom is about to come out with theirs like at the top of the year, to where like we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. Our agents would be having it for us. But if you think about it from an accessibility standpoint, and I like to use this lens because um, it helps it helps eliminate some of the fears if we look at it as something that does assist us as opposed to something that's replacing us. So in the case of like a digital twin, if doctors are wanting to do more research, in the case of like, I'll use myself, I am a 3-time transplant recipient. I've gotten 2 kidneys and a pancreas. Well, we just can't open up bodies, just to see and test how organs function and so forth. I mean, we can do a pretty good job with the technology that's out, but if we have a digital twin of that organ, so something that's replicating the function of a healthy organ or an unhealthy organ, they're able to get the research, that viable information that they need, possibly at a fraction of the cost the more advanced that technology becomes, as well as minimalizing any type of human, encounter outside of testing. So, we're not harming humans, we're just leveraging the information that in the data that our body produces and able to learn that using a tool as opposed to a human. That's how I see the use of digital twins in helping species, helping another species, and us staying as the apex and as the top intelligent species that's there. Is this is just a productivity tool in the area of agents. We're going to see that sooner than later when we're talking about these autonomous vehicles. I will say again, for use cases in my instance, it's really hard as a woman that is Black with a disability to trust a stranger to get me from point A to point B, let's say leveraging a rideshare service. I might, if we can get the engineering right, if we can lower the probability of casualties, I might be a little bit more inclined to trust an agent, an autonomous vehicle to get me to where I'm going and eliminate that human factor, the trust that has to, you know, incur like almost instantaneous when you hop into a vehicle. Like, I think people really understand that. Like, you hop into a vehicle with somebody you don't know. They try to ease your mind on that by giving like, hey, this is your driver. You get a picture, you get his driving history, and you are trusting the companies to do their due diligence in their background checking and information that they have on this person. But it really does not properly give you who this personality characteristics, things that could be of potential danger by not knowing this. You get what I'm saying? Like,
When you put it in perspective like that and think about, I mean, and that's a lot of things, and we could go down a whole rabbit hole with respect to where we actually instill our trust into other human people, especially as a parent. Very
yeah,
interesting. I get what you're saying. And it's to get this narrative of the other viewpoint when we're talking about something like autonomous vehicles, where you consistently hear, in my experience and what I've seen and just heard on online and you'll more so come in contact with the thought process of, well, oh no, I would never get into a car that doesn't have a human at the wheel, versus what you're saying now where you're like, well, I don't have to worry about the potential crazy person in the front seat. I just have to be okay with the fact that whoever produced and set up the engineering capacity and technology of this robot essentially that I'm riding around in got it right. So it's almost an interestingly different viewpoint on the human trust factor within itself, because it's like I have to trust that the people who formulated this got it right versus the person who's physically sitting behind the wheel. I've never really, I'll honestly say I don't know that I've necessarily thought about it in that way.
well,
So
look at the liability factor though. If this is a $1 trillion company, a multi-billion dollar company, and they have autonomous vehicles, where would you think they're going to put their most, you know, the force behind who they are into? Are we going to depend on a human or are we going to depend on, entire research develop, sectors and department? Like, our name is behind this. We're not behind Jane or Joe. We're behind this vehicle with our brand on it. We're going to do what we can, because if you look at it this in this instance with the vehicle, if the human gets into a car wreck, human factor, we could say like, yeah, it comes off of the company and like that they'll wash it. Hey, that was a human issue. We put it on the driver and so forth. But with things are going, the reward of, you know, getting more people in vehicles, getting them to their destination safer with smart cities and tech, all of that's going to work in favor of this autonomous vehicle, but our name is on it. We can't put that on anybody. So it is in our best interest that we get it right in the engineering, and that's where it's going, because the rewards are larger, the risks are higher, but the rewards are larger as well. And I would put my buck on the company getting it right, as opposed to them putting an investment in the driver. But again, I don't want to say that I'm a contrarian or anything like that. I see opportunities and gaps. So wherever there's fear, contrary to like, culturally what we do, I'm kind of looking at it from like, where's the fear at? Where we going? Like, who's that? What's going on? To face it, head on and fix it for our betterment, not just, and I hate to kind of, show it from that aspect, but like think of the possibilities of autonomous vehicles for people in marginalized communities. We know the resources are, up in the affluent areas, but we can't live there. But if I can get there and drive and have a driver get me there at a fraction of the cost, why not? If the costs go down because that money isn't being whatever I put, my dollars to, that's not being split by a human driver, but it's going straight to a vehicle. That person might have lost that income, but they can recoup it in other ways, leveraging the same technology that's driving this car. And I can get to my destination cheaper and bring all of those resources back to my community because that income is coming back to my community. And then if my house is being uplifted because of higher income, then my neighborhood in turn, and then my community, and then the city. You get what I'm saying? So it really is how we turn it in our favor as opposed to just being motivated and moved by fear.
And yeah, definitely I see it. And one thing I was thinking about too, just being somebody with a STEM background, and especially as we're thinking about education and young people, and there's always that conversation of, well, how do we get more kids into STEM, and especially in our community. And I'm looking at the potential of even just the investment in research and development in those
Mhm.
departments. And you have to have the best team in terms of engineers, and doing that back end work to make sure that before this thing even rolls off the lot, it's
Right.
it's up to code and spec completely. So just I think that the intent behind like a lot of the work that's put into it before the vehicle even goes out is that would be, yeah, I think that's a really intriguing point. So I'm very appreciative that you highlighted that and gave that gave that vantage point on it, because I think a lot of people, whenever they catch this, I think they're gonna be like, I never came across it. It's just a different way of thinking about it. So I appreciate that. Man, this has been really enlightening. I just appreciate it. I do have just one more question related to your work in particular. I guess in reference to what you're doing in this space, is there one thing that you really want people to know and to take away from the work that you're doing?
I want to speak to anybody with any apprehension of like starting. I don't know. I'm gonna just say like I feel led by God to kind of speak in this area, but I think, and going back to what you said earlier, people just they'll see the end result and be like, oh, you just got there and so forth. Like right now, like this year was the hardest year for Visiotech and JancynCo. We got a lot of awards, we got a lot of recognitions, we worked on some really great projects, but we bootstrapped. Everything that we earned in the past, years, we put right back into the research and development of our own products. Their funding for all of the groups that I represent is low. We saw that with the Fearless Fund, how they attacked, that support system and so forth. And so it really was kind of like an all-in mission at the beginning of the year to like believe that what God have placed in my heart is going to uh it's going to eventually come into fruition. I just have to stay the course and the process behind it. Everything that we built between the framework and the chatbot that's coming out, and really trying to lean into the accessibility part of it, we're hoping to catch the attention of like the big tech firms to kind of look at the bullies and hold them accountable of like, hey, you do have a responsibility to be mindful of the consumer in their wholeness. And so, you know, it's really lofty. It is a really lofty goal. It is really, it might be a suicide, like a kamikaze mission for some, but for me, it's, I know disruptor is overused, but I really am that kid that like bust into place and I'm asking the questions. But I'm also coming with like the tools. And if anybody has any inkling in them or any desire to like, okay, I see a solution to a problem. I don't know where to start. Just start. And I know people say it all the time, but like if it's writing it down on a napkin, shoot. I mean, use ChatGPT. Take a picture of that idea and ask it what you can do with, just do something. A lot of opportunities and solutions for people are missed because of people standing in their own way. I could have very much used the fact that I could not see. I was on dialysis, couldn't walk at one point in time. I couldn't, type. I couldn't get anything out. But like when I didn't know how to use anything, I just spoke and had somebody dictate. I spoke my blogs. When I couldn't see, asked somebody to help me, view something until like I leveraged um like a service like Be My Eyes or um chat or meta glasses now. I did something like, and I'm hoping to be the solution for somebody one day, if not already. But that never happens. That gap isn't closed or bridged until like you get past yourself and do something.
There you have it. And again, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on to the platform, share your narrative, talk about the work you're doing, the importance of just awareness for all of us, and also just just the encouragement and telling everybody basically, look, you know, kind of put those excuses to the side, and we can continue to thrive and grow, and being honest about a lot of what that looks like too, in process, because I think a lot of times again we do have you know conversations where things might be glossed over, or people kind of leave certain aspects out, but I think you gave us the game, in a lot of ways, which is extremely valuable, and shouldn't be taken lightly. So truly appreciative of having you, Tiffani, on the platform. If there are any closing thoughts, remarks that you want to offer to the audience, folks tuning in, and then also let us know how we can tap into your work, connect with you, follow what you're doing, and also potentially become clients and support in terms of your business. Let us know those things.
One thing I like to leave with everybody is what my dad told me uh, right before I went into my last surgery on my eyes, before I completely lost my sight. He told me, if anything were to happen or whatnot, if you lose your sight, you would have never lost your vision. And so just hope people take that and realize that like what you have inside, you can always pursue. Don't be limited to what's in front of you, what you see. Really lean into what God has given you. As far as connecting, I love connecting with folks. I am an extrovert introvert, so I I meet with folks all the time until like I can't, and then I go recover, and then I come back. And so no, if you want to connect with me on any social media, just at Tiffani Jancyn. That's TiffaniJancyn. I'm kooky. I'm all over the place. So if anything, you'll be entertained. On a professional note, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Tiffani J. Martin. If check us out on visiotech.co. That's VISIOTECH.co. And same as far as email, Tiffani@visiotech.co. But yeah, just check us out. We're always connecting with folks, love partnering on projects. Even if you just need somebody to bounce ideas off of, that's what we're here for. So yeah, absolutely. Reach.
Tiffani, thank you for joining us. And for everybody that has tuned in, thank you all for continuing to come back for Narrative, The Road to 100. And we look forward to continuing to support. And for everybody, continue to come back, check out all of the resources, information, and of course, amazing interviews at blackaimedia.com. And with that, peace and love, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.